Ladies and gentlemen, there is a silent killer in your mind. It's not failure. It's not fear. It's not rejection. It's the voice that whispers, "You're not enough." That voice, your negative thinking, is the enemy. And it's time to kill it. Negative thinking is not reality. It's a reflex, a habit, a deeply wired loop playing the same broken story over and over. But here's the truth. You are not your thoughts. You are the one aware of those thoughts. And if you are aware of them, you can change them. Rewire your brain through neuroplasticity by understanding one powerful truth. Your brain is constantly changing in response to your thoughts, behaviors, and experiences. Every time you think a thought, practice a habit, or engage in a behavior, you're reinforcing neural pathways. Negative thinking patterns become strong, not because they're true, but because they're repeated. Neuroplasticity means that the brain's wiring is not fixed. It's flexible, adaptable, and reshaped by what you focus on. If you constantly dwell on fear, worry, or limitation, those pathways deepen, becoming the brain's default mode. But when you start to deliberately shift your attention to positive, constructive, and empowering thoughts, you initiate a rewiring process. This doesn't happen overnight. It requires consistent, intentional repetition. It means catching yourself when your mind drifts into doubt and consciously guiding it back to strength, possibility, and purpose. Visualization is one way to do this. When you imagine success, the brain doesn't know the difference between that and real experience. You're already creating the blueprint for future confidence. Journaling and affirmations act as written and spoken repetitions that reinforce new circuits. The more emotional energy you bring to these moments, the deeper the neural imprint. Emotion acts as a glue for memory and wiring. So speak your truth with passion, feel your future with conviction, and train your brain like a muscle. Every time you redirect a negative thought into a positive one, every time you push through resistance, you are not just thinking better, you are changing your biology, altering the shape and structure of your brain itself, proving to your nervous system that a new path is possible, building resilience where there used to be reactivity, laying down new connections that support growth, clarity, and personal strength, ultimately transforming the mental architecture that governs how you see yourself and the world around you. Suppress negative thought loops via prefrontal cortex activation by understanding how your brain processes emotion and logic under pressure. The prefrontal cortex, located at the front of the brain, is responsible for executive functions like decision-making, focus, planning, and regulating emotion. When you fall into a spiral of negative thoughts, such as self-doubt, overthinking, or anxiety, what's happening neurologically is that the limbic system, especially the amygdala, is overpowering the prefrontal cortex. This creates a state where emotional reactivity dominates rational thinking. To break that cycle, you need to bring the prefrontal cortex back online, and that requires deliberate mental engagement. One of the most effective ways to do this is through focused cognitive tasks, writing, problem solving, or even having structured conversations. When you journal, for example, you're not just venting, you're activating brain regions that help you label your emotions, process them logically, and distance yourself from raw emotional over-identification. Another method is goal-oriented thinking. By shifting attention from "why is this happening to me" to "what can I do right now?" you recruit neural circuits that support agency, control, and planning. Even simple actions like writing down a to-do list or reciting your goals out loud engage the prefrontal cortex and break the feedback loop of passive worry. Meditation with a focus on breath or counting and cognitive reframing through self-talk also strengthen these neural pathways, creating a greater sense of mental clarity. The more frequently you practice bringing attention back to intentional thought, the more dominant and efficient your prefrontal cortex becomes. With time, it overrides automatic negative loops and rewires your default response to be calmer, clearer, and more constructive. You begin to respond instead of react, to think instead of fear, to act with logic rather than spiral in emotion, training your brain to lead with strategy and strength instead of sinking into survival and stress. Use visual anchoring to stabilize your mental state by leveraging the deep connection between your visual system and your emotional regulation pathways. Your eyes are not just passive tools for seeing, they are extensions of your brain, wired directly into your nervous system. Where and how you direct your gaze can either amplify stress or bring calm and control. When your thoughts are racing or you're overwhelmed by negativity, narrowing your visual focus often corresponds with heightened internal tension as your brain goes into a state of threat detection and overanalysis. To counter this, engage in panoramic vision. Soften your gaze, expand your visual field, and take in the entire environment without focusing on a single point. This activates the parasympathetic branch of your nervous system, signaling to the brain that you are safe, reducing cortisol levels, and creating space between stimulus and reaction. Another form of visual anchoring is to lock your eyes on a fixed object, a neutral or calming focal point, while practicing breath work or grounding exercises. This reduces internal noise and stabilizes scattered thought patterns, allowing your mind to slow down and reorient. Over time, your brain begins to associate that anchor point with psychological safety and clarity. You can also create personal visual cues in your environment, objects that represent strength, peace, or your future self, to redirect your mind in moments of stress. These cues act as neurosymbolic anchors, reinforcing positive cognitive loops every time your eyes land on them. The act of visual anchoring also aids in redirecting attention away from intrusive thoughts, helping to train focus and mindfulness. By using your eyes consciously, you gain access to internal control through external attention, allowing you to shift mental gears intentionally, moving from chaos to calm, from overwhelm to centeredness, from rumination to grounded presence. Control internal state through breathwork by understanding that your breath is not just a biological function, it's a remote control for your nervous system, a direct line into how your body and brain process stress, emotion, and focus. Most people breathe unconsciously, shallowly, and irregularly, which keeps their body in a subtle state of anxiety and alertness. But when you take control of your breath, you take control of your internal environment. Specific breathing patterns signal your brain that it's time to either activate or relax. For instance, the physiological sigh, a technique involving 2 short inhales through the nose, followed by a long exhale through the mouth, rapidly reduces stress by offloading carbon dioxide, calming the amygdala, and bringing the body back into parasympathetic dominance. This is not spiritual, this is science-backed neurobiology. Controlled breathing slows your heart rate, lowers blood pressure, and shifts your mental state from reactive to responsive. It gives your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making and clarity, a chance to lead, rather than letting your limbic system hijack your thoughts with panic or fear. When practiced regularly, breathwork becomes a powerful mental training tool. Deep diaphragmatic breathing enhances vagus nerve activity, which governs rest and digest functions, mood regulation, and emotional resilience. Box breathing, inhale, hold, exhale, hold in equal counts, helps synchronize the breath with the mind, creating coherence and heart rate variability and boosting your ability to handle pressure. Even a few minutes a day of intentional breathing can recalibrate your baseline, making you more grounded, clear-headed, and emotionally stable. In high-stress moments, when your mind feels hijacked by negativity, breath becomes an anchor, a tool you can use anytime, anywhere to recenter. Over time, this repeated control over your breath builds neurological pathways that make calmness more automatic, focus more accessible, and emotional control more habitual. Use self-directed neurochemistry for confidence by recognizing that you have the ability to trigger the release of brain chemicals that shape your mood, motivation, and sense of self-worth without relying on external validation. Confidence isn't something you wait to feel, it's something you generate by how you think, act, and reward your own progress. Dopamine, the brain's molecule of motivation and anticipation, is not just released by big wins, it's most powerfully and sustainably triggered by small, incremental steps when you learn to internally celebrate the effort itself. When you acknowledge progress, not perfection, you condition your brain to associate forward movement with pleasure, making persistence easier and confidence stronger. This is self-directed neurochemistry in action. You don't need someone else to clap for you. You become your own source of psychological reinforcement. Even saying to yourself, I showed up today, or I made progress, causes dopamine to drip into your system, fueling momentum. Combine this with physical movement, especially cold exposure, breath work, or exercise, and you amplify the release of norepinephrine and epinephrine, sharpening alertness and reinforcing your ability to push through discomfort. These chemicals are not random. They are responsive to your behavior. When you learn to consciously engage in actions that reward your effort, you train your brain to feel stronger, more capable, and more in control. Serotonin, another confidence-building chemical, increases when you feel a sense of contribution or alignment with your purpose. Taking initiative, helping others, or acting in congruence with your values boosts internal self-respect, which forms the backbone of real confidence. Not ego, but earned self-belief. This system becomes a loop. Action fuels neurochemical release, which strengthens your belief in your ability to act again. Through deliberate self-talk, challenge, and celebration of effort, you sculpt a new identity in your brain's architecture, one that no longer waits to feel ready, but creates readiness through practice. Confidence becomes less about the outcome and more about the chemistry of choosing growth over fear, forward motion over paralysis, and self-reinforcement over dependency on praise. You direct attention through behavioral tools by understanding that your mind is a spotlight, and wherever that spotlight shines, your emotional state follows. When trapped in cycles of negative thinking or mental fatigue, it's not always enough to simply tell yourself to stop. The brain needs a physical cue, a behavioral shift to interrupt the loop and refocus attention. This is where behavioral tools become essential. Actions you can take in the physical world to influence your mental state directly. One of the most effective tools is movement. Walking, especially in a natural environment, activates the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, areas tied to memory processing and emotional regulation. Rhythmic movement like walking, running, or cycling engages bilateral stimulation, which can reduce emotional intensity and bring clarity to thought. Cold exposure, even just splashing cold water on your face or stepping outside into cooler air, creates a strong physiological stimulus that activates the locus coeruleus in the brainstem, releasing norepinephrine and breaking mental inertia. This shock to the system redirects your brain's attention away from inner chaos and toward physical sensation, which in turn resets emotional reactivity. Another tool is state change through posture. Simply straightening your spine, opening your chest, and lifting your gaze alters how your brain perceives your current state. When you slouch or lower your head, your brain interprets it as defeat. When you shift your posture to one of presence and confidence, your neurochemistry responds accordingly. Environmental shifts also serve as attention redirection. Changing your surroundings, cleaning your space, or going into a different room creates a visual and sensory reset, offering your brain new cues for behavior and mood. Even engaging your hands in a focused task, drawing, cooking, writing, organizing, can reallocate cognitive resources, anchoring you in the present and pulling you out of abstract rumination. Behavioral tools give the mind a new job, a new pattern to follow, disrupting old cycles of negativity by providing a concrete alternative. They act as levers that bypass the abstract and tap into biology, using action to change perception, sensation to override anxiety, and momentum to replace paralysis. Ladies and gentlemen, the war against negative thinking is not won in a single moment. It's won in the quiet decisions you make every day to reclaim control of your mind. You are not powerless. You are not broken. Your brain is designed to change, to grow, to be rewired. Every breath you take, every thought you challenge, every step you make toward action, these are tools, not just habits. You now understand how to rewire your brain through neuroplasticity, how to suppress negativity through focused attention, how to stabilize your mind through visual anchoring, how to command your internal state through breath, how to build unshakable self-confidence by mastering your brain's chemistry, and how to redirect your attention through deliberate behavior. These are not theories. They are mechanisms. You are the operator. You are the architect. The voice in your head is not your truth. It's your training. And training can change. From this moment on, decide to stop being a prisoner of your thoughts and start becoming the master of your mind. Because the strongest version of you is not the one without fear or doubt. It's the one who shows up despite them, rewires them, and refuses to surrender to the noise. Kill your negative thinking, not just once, but every single time it tries to reclaim the throne. Your mind is your kingdom. Rule it.